How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
From the Kirby Center of Hillsdale College in Washington, D.C., it is Eric Erickson. Delighted to be with you. Welcome, everybody. I have access to phones. I'll take your calls, 877-973-7425 across the country. Delighted to be with you from Washington. I haven't been mugged yet. Got into the car last night with a driver. I said, so how bad is the crime up here? He's like, well, it's bad, but not where you're going. They've upped the police in those areas. So here for my son's 9th and 10th grade class tours, I feel bad. So we flew up last night so I could have meetings today, meeting with Leader McConnell later this afternoon, meeting with the Speaker of the House and some others. And so we came up early, and the rest of the class was coming by bus. They were supposed to leave at 6 o'clock this morning. As of 10:30, the bus was finally showing up. The tour company never sent the bus this morning. Oh, so they won't get here till late. Now, we, of course, have the big news of the day, but to get to the big news, I got to go back. I have to go back. Listen, I'm not always right, but I did practice constitutional law. I actually know the Constitution. And I told you guys months ago, the problem with the 14th Amendment argument was this, and this was the fatal flaw. This has always been the Achilles heel of the argument. The 14th Amendment was written not to expand state power after the Civil War, but to take away state power after the Civil War. And it would boggle any of the authors' minds to think that any state after the Civil War and the enactment of the 14th Amendment had the power to throw a presidential candidate off the ballot, particularly when presidential candidates do not actually run for office. They're elected by the Electoral College. That was always the Achilles heel. But if you listen to the talking heads on CNN or the talking heads on MSNBC or read the talking heads in the New York Times or the Washington Post or USA Today, you would be convinced it was a no-brainer of an argument. Judge Michael Luttig has been all over MSNBC saying it is absolutely inconceivable that the Supreme Court of the United States would go with Donald Trump. I hope you get the Princess Bride reference. It's inconceivable that they would do this. This now from the United States Supreme Court's 9-0 decision. Literally all 9 justices of the Supreme Court today sided with Donald Trump. Someone's on the fainting couch at MSNBC today. This case raises the question whether the states, in addition to Congress, may also enforce Section 3. We conclude that states may disqualify persons holding or attempting to hold state office, but states have no power under the Constitution to enforce Section 3 with respect to federal officers, especially the presidency. Quote, in our federal system, the national government possesses only limited powers. The states and the people retain the remainder, end quote. Bond versus United States, 2014. Among those retained powers is the power of a state to, quote, order the process of its own governance, end quote. Alden versus Maine, 1999. In particular, the states enjoy sovereign, quote, power to prescribe the qualifications of their own officers and the manner of their elections free from external interference except so far as plainly provided by the Constitution of the United States, end quote. Taylor versus Beckham, 1900. Although the 14th Amendment restricts state power, nothing in it plainly withdraws from the states this traditional authority. And after ratification of the 14th Amendment, states use this authority to disqualify state officers in accordance with state statutes. Such power over governance, however, does not extend to federal office holders and candidates, because federal office holders, quote, owe their existence and functions to the united voice of the whole, not of a portion of the people, end quote. Powers over their election and qualifications must be specifically, quote, delegated to rather than reserved by the states. U.S. Term Limits versus Thornton, 1995, quoting Justice Story, Commentaries on the Constitution. That's the term limits case. But nothing in the Constitution delegates to the states any power to enforce Section 3 against federal office holders and candidates. As an initial matter, not even the respondents contend that the Constitution authorizes states to somehow remove sitting federal office holders who may be violating Section 3. Such a power would flout the principle that the Constitution guarantees the entire independence of the general government from any control by the respective states. Indeed, consistent with that principle, states lack even the lesser powers to issue writs of mandamus against federal officers or to grant habeas corpus relief to persons in federal custody. The respondents nonetheless maintain that states may enforce Section 3 against candidates for federal office. But the text of the 14th Amendment on its face does not affirmatively delegate such a power to the states. The terms of the amendment speak only to enforcement by Congress, which enjoys power to enforce the amendment through legislation pursuant to Section 5. This can hardly come as a surprise, given that the substantive provisions of the amendment embody significant limitations on state authority. Under the amendment, states cannot abridge privileges or immunities, deprive persons of life, liberty, or property without due process, deny equal protection, or deny male inhabitants the right to vote without thereby suffering reduced representation in the House. On the other hand, the 14th Amendment grants new power to Congress to enforce the provisions of the amendment against the states. It would be incongruous to read this particular amendment as granting the states the power, silently no less, to disqualify a candidate for federal office. The only other plausible constitutional sources of such delegation are the elections and electors clauses, which authorize states to conduct and regulate congressional and presidential elections respectively. But there is little reason to think that these clauses implicitly authorize the states to enforce Section 3 against federal office holders and candidates. Granted, the states that authority would invert the 14th Amendment's rebalancing of federal and state power. The text of Section 3 reinforces the conclusions. Its final sentence empowers Congress to remove any Section 3 disability by a two-thirds vote of each House. The text imposes no limits on that power, and Congress may exercise it at any time, as the respondents concede. In fact, historically, Congress sometimes exercised this amnesty power post-election to ensure that some of the people's chosen candidates could take office. But if states were free to enforce Section 3 by barring candidates from running in the first place, Congress would be forced to exercise its disability removal power before voting begins, if it wished for its decision to have any effect on the current election cycle. Perhaps a state may burden congressional authority in any such way when it exercises its exclusive sovereign power over its own state offices. But it is implausible to suppose the Constitution affirmatively delegated to states the authority to impose such a burden on congressional power with respect to candidates for federal office. I read you this entire excerpt because it's a reminder, not only was I right about the outcome, but I was right about how they were going to decide it. I want that in the record. I have so many trolls who call this show and say, back in 2012, you said something that was wrong, Erickson. How can we believe you now? I would just like to point out for the record that not only did I call this case right and say it was going to be unanimous, but told you exactly the reasoning they were going to come up with. I was right, and the entirety of the legal expert talking heads on television industry, they were wrong. How can this be? It's very simple. They've been broken by Donald Trump. Donald Trump broke a lot of brains. I may not care for the guy, but I refuse to be broken because politics is not my God. I don't engage in the idol worship of politics. And the people who have been worshiping the ideology and the idols of politics are the ones who got broken because Donald Trump smashed their gods. And so they broke. Their faith was not in a higher being, but their faith was in some mythology of this government and the way they suspected it to work for them and their ideals and their ideas and their positions. And it's not a coincidence that all the progressives and, frankly, a lot of constitutional lawyers from the right who did not like Donald Trump are the ones who offered up this theory. Yeah, you've got to acknowledge it was also conservative talking heads who didn't like Trump who advanced this theory. It was Republicans who didn't like Trump who brought this case. It was Republican constitutional lawyer and judge Michael Luttig who's been the talking head, giving voice to it and ammunition to it and intellectual firepower to it. And unanimously, the Supreme Court has rejected it because the Supreme Court is grounded in the reality-based community and these people are not. It is a unanimous opinion. In fact, it's a per curiam opinion of the United States Supreme Court. And that matters because a per curiam decision, if I can talk today, is a unanimous agreement of the whole of the court where they speak in the voice of the court united. So it's not John Roberts authoring, although reading this, it sounds like a John Roberts analysis, but John Roberts doesn't put his name on it because this is the unanimous opinion of the Supreme Court and they don't want their names tied to it. Now, it is true. The three progressive justices almost had to save themselves from the mercies of the rabid progressive base, issue a concurring opinion essentially saying that the majority had gone too far. This is the end of the per curiam. All 9 members of the court agree with the result. Our colleagues writing separately further agree with many of the reasons this opinion provides for reaching it. So far as we can tell, they object only to our taking into account the distinctive way Section 3 works and the fact that Section 5 vests in Congress the power to enforce it. These are not the only reasons the states lack powers to enforce this particular constitutional provision with respect to federal offices. But they are important ones, and it is a combination of all the reasons set forth in this opinion, not, as some of our colleagues would have it, just one particular rationale that resolves this case. It is our view, in our view, each of these reasons is necessary to provide a complete explanation for the judgment the court unanimously reaches. The judgment of the Colorado Supreme Court is reversed. The mandate shall issue forthwith. Justice Barrett writes in concurrence, the majority's choice of a different path leaves the remaining justices with the choice of how to respond. In my judgment, this is not the time to amplify disagreement with stridency. The court has settled a politically charged issue in the volatile season of a presidential election, particularly in this circumstance. Writing on the court should turn the national temperature down, not up. For present purposes, our differences are far less important than our unanimity. All 9 justices agree on the outcome of this case. This is the message Americans should take home. Now, the 3 progressive justices end this way. Section 3 serves an important though rarely needed role in our democracy. The American people have the power to vote for and elect candidates for national office, and that is a great and glorious thing. The men who drafted and ratified the 14th Amendment, however, have witnessed an insurrection and rebellion to defend slavery. They wanted to ensure that those who had participated in that insurrection and in possible future insurrections could not return to prominent roles. Today, the majority goes beyond the necessities of this case to limit how Section 3 can bar an oath-breaking insurrectionist from becoming president. Although we agree that Colorado cannot enforce Section 3, we protest the majority's effort to use this case to define the limits of federal enforcement of that provision. Because we would decide only the issue before us, we conclude only in judgment. Essentially, what they're saying is that they think that this court has preemptively bound Congress to follow certain methodologies, not just the Colorado Supreme Court, but they agree that Colorado cannot do this. They agree that Michigan cannot do this, that Wisconsin and Illinois cannot do it, that Maine cannot do it, that no state can do it. They agree. The talking heads lost. MSNBC hardest hit. The bottom line is that the legal scholars of America and the talking heads on television refuse to exercise any level of humility that they should be exercising in these sorts of cases. I got it right, your host. They, the legal experts, the constitutional scholars who teach in law schools, got it wrong. I wonder why that is. In a unanimous opinion of the court, you can't say it was partisanship on their side, but maybe it was on the side of the legal scholars. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the phones, as always, text ERIC, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. You can sign up for the daily email, the show notes email, the podcast, the live stream. Follow me around social media. Y'all, the pizza oven, I got it. I put it together. I made great pizza. Except for my own. It stuck and fell apart, looked like a burned amoeba. But everybody else's pizzas turned out great. Gonna be making more. Now, okay, to go back to this Supreme Court case. The story here really is the lack of humility by the expert class and the media in America. They have exaggerated climate change and gotten it wrong. They got this Supreme Court case and so many other Supreme Court cases wrong. They've downplayed the rise of left-wing anti-Semitism in the country and overplayed their hand on right-wing anti-Semitism. Then there's COVID. They got so much about COVID wrong. They didn't correct themselves as the data changed, as the virus evolved. They doubled down on their original findings. Despite a virus was changing, they wouldn't. They lack humility. They have unearned credibility. They continue to ruin their credibility, and they are taking the media down with them. Look even now at the left-wing commentary on the Fani Willis case in Georgia, how much clearly they're getting wrong about that case. I don't know what the judge is going to do, but so much of the original speculation was wrong. So much of it has changed. They lack humility. And it is undermining them, which is good. But it's undermining truth itself, because when they claim to be telling us the truth and they're not, people go looking for other things. In a postmodern age, when there's your truth and my truth and people don't pay attention to the real truth, it undermines what really is true, particularly when the experts try to censor things that are true that may disagree with them and prove them. You know, we could all stand to be a little more humble and exercise some humility. They, in particular, could really use to exercise humility, and I don't think they will. Now, speaking of exercising things, I want you to exercise your right to go to Stamps.com and use them to save money when you're shipping. When you're sending packages, you can save up to 89% off UPS and post office rates with Stamps.com. All you got to do is go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone, and put in my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K. You can sign up. There's no long-term commitment. There's no contract to sign, and you get access to their portfolio for being able to connect into the UPS and post office shipping. So you get the cheapest options, the fastest options. All you need is your mobile device or a computer and a printer. You print your labels, you get shipping. You can even order your supplies from Stamps.com. They've got great rates on their supplies as well. And then arrange pickup at your home or office so you never have to stand in line. Do you really want to go stand in line at the post office with all those germy people? No. You schedule pickup at your home or your office. You go to Stamps.com, you click on the microphone, and you put in my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K. You get a free digital scale, you get some free postage. You have no contract to sign, folks. You save time, save money with Stamps.com. It's a wonderful thing to use as a small business or an individual who ships a lot. Stamps.com, click the microphone, put in Eric, E-R-I-C-K. Get shipping and saving today. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation, coming to you live from the Kirby Center of Hillsdale College in Washington, D.C. I'll be off tomorrow and Wednesday taking a group of 9th and 10th graders around D.C. Your prayers are appreciated. May God have mercy on my soul. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Before I go on to anything else, can I just talk about the Caitlin Clark? I'm not calling her Caitlin Collins. In my notes, I wrote Caitlin Collins from CNN. Caitlin, don't want to make the Nikki Haley mistake. Caitlin Clark, God bless her. She's broken Pete Maravich's record in the NCAA in basketball. But can I just say there's got to be a footnote for that? Rushing to, in the media, to make men and women's sports equal, even though they're not. They've left out some key caveats in Caitlin Clark breaking Pete Maravich's record. Now, you should know I'm from Louisiana. LSU plays at the Pete Maravich Center at LSU. It's named for him. She's broken his records, except she hasn't really. As the media's rushing to do this, let's put this into perspective. Pete Maravich played basketball before the invention of the three-point line. And he only played 3 seasons. And he played against men. Now, some will respond and say, but he played in a segregated sport at the time in the SEC. That's true. But consider it is now 2024 and his record has just fallen. It holds up over time. And his record, you can't really say has really fallen when he was able to pack it in 3 seasons without a three-point line. So look, this isn't to undermine her. She's a phenomenal basketball player. She is clearly a phenomenal basketball player. But in this rush to equalize the sports and, a woman's better than a man, you got to put all the asterisks in there. Well, there was no three-point line, and he did his record in 3 seasons. It's taken her longer to get there. Blah 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 blah. And they don't want to talk about that. They just want to say, a girl has beaten a boy after all these years. It does her a disservice. And it does truth a disservice, but they don't care about the truth. They really don't. The media is collectively Pontius Pilate. What is truth? Which is a perfect segue into what I wanted to talk about. Now, I had to shake up the show because of the Supreme Court decision. I'll get to how I was going to start the show in the second hour. Had to get to the Supreme Court. But I'm not moving this one. I don't know if you guys heard about this. I assume many of you have. The University of California, Berkeley, had a Jewish speaker come to campus. They had to shut it down, and police had to evacuate the Jewish students. More than one Jewish student was physically assaulted. Chairs were thrown, windows were smashed. The University of California, Berkeley is already in a lawsuit over its allowance for anti-Semitism on campus. This just feeds into it. Do you all remember when Donald Trump was president, the ongoing hand-wringing by the media about the rise of anti-Semitism and right-wing nationalism and white supremacy? It was everywhere. You couldn't turn on a news channel if it wasn't Fox without hearing the hand-wringing. Ever since the Charlottesville, Virginia situation, the media has chosen to lecture us. They've wanted us to know the FBI says the rise of right-wing nationalism and the threats from the right, the greatest national security threats in this country other than global warming. And even then, global warming is only caused by a bunch of privileged white people, so it's all white power tied together. That and farting cows. Maybe the cows are white nationalists. No, I'm not gonna bring relatives into this discussion. So my son's in studio with me. He's looking at. Oh, I can't bring that up. Can't bring that up. The media focuses on these things, but it turns out the anti-Semites are full up on the left. They're in the progressive causes. They're in the progressive activists. They're in the colleges. They're in the Ivy League. And notice how the media has chosen to stop covering it. It's like the anti-Asian violence. So white dude in Atlanta, Georgia is going to Asian massage parlors, not for massages, but for sex. He's addicted. He claims to come to Christ. He can't get over his sin. He can't get over his sexual addiction. And so the way he processes this, because he's crazy, is he goes and kills all the prostitutes at the Asian massage parlor. Notice, by the way, to this day, when we lament the victims of the massage parlors and stuff, no one in the media has wanted to have a conversation that actually these Asian massage parlors were houses of prostitution masquerading as massage parlors. They don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about the white guy and the anti-Asian hate until it turns out the FBI data, the data shows that the overwhelming majority of violence against the Asian community, the AAPI community, the Asian American Pacific Islander community, a made-up census term. The overwhelming majority of that violence is conducted by young black men. If you are Asian and assaulted in the United States, the odds are going to be the assailant is a young black man. In fact, the data actually shows that Asians are more likely to inflict injury on other Asians than white people are. Not since Nagasaki have white people committed that much violence against Asians. The overwhelming majority of it is young black men. There was that professor at University of Colorado Boulder who tried to argue that the reason young black men are the predominant inflictors of violence on the Asian community is that they're actually retaliating for the oppression of white people on them, and since they can't oppress the oppressor, they just go after other minorities. It was this Asian professor, or it was a like minority studies professor who I think actually is Asian at the University of Colorado, essentially tried to say, we're still not wrong. We're not going to admit we're wrong. We're going to claim that the violence of young black men against Asians was caused by white people. There's no humility. But once the data came out, the media moved on. You don't hear a lot of study, except when, like, you know, I thought it was very funny. After the October 7th attack by Hamas against Israel, the White House comes out very forcefully against anti-Semitism, against Islamophobia, and against Asian hatred, against the hostility. Yes, because October 7th was really about the Asian American Pacific Islander demographic of the census tract. That's what it was all about. But the media pivoted. They had to go back to the white nationalists. They had to go back to the festering anti-Semitism of the right, the Nick Fuenteses of the world, the David Dukes of the world, the unrepentant anti-Semitism of the white nationalists, the subtle taking digs at Jews from the right. And then the left said, hold my beer. And they literally started marching on college campuses in favor of the genocide of Jews, chanting from river to sea, an explicit call for the elimination of Israel and the Jewish people. And notice how the media, they've stopped covering this. Can you imagine, just ask yourself, if what happened at Berkeley, if what happened at the University of California, Berkeley, had happened at Liberty University, or you know what, I'm broadcasting from Hillsdale. If the anti-Semitic attacks that happened at Harvard, or Yale, or Princeton, or the University of California had happened at Hillsdale, or Liberty, or now because they've gotten rid of the DEI office at the University of Florida, can you imagine what the media would do, what the coverage of the press would be? It would be overwhelming. It would be nonstop. It would be censorious. It would be lecturing on the rise of right-wing anti-Semitism led by Donald Trump. But instead it's happening at Berkeley, at Harvard, and Princeton, and Columbia. It's happening at the Ivy League. It's happening in the circles of the left. It's happening on the recruitment farms of the media. The Washington Post did a big story about violence from the Middle East and from Israel, and how they got it so wrong. Palestinian babies were being killed. Turns out they got it all wrong. Published in the Washington Post late on December 2nd. And updated the following day. It's a gripping saga of what happened 3 weeks earlier to a handful of Palestinian infants in neonatal intensive care of Gaza City's Al-Nasser Children's Hospital when the facility staff and patients were forced to evacuate. A story so powerful and emotive it made headlines around the world. The 1,368-word article by reporters Miriam Berger, Evan Hill, and Hazim Balusha is in reality a mashup of three interconnected stories. First is the he said, she said between military spokesman for Israel, the Red Cross, and the hospital administrators. Second is the story of an unnamed male nurse who was faced with the terrible decision of choosing among a group of premature infants to take with him and which to leave behind on oxygen respirators. And the third are the intrepid journalist's shocking discovery 2 weeks later of the infant's decomposed body still connected to machinery but mauled by dogs and covered in insects. Turns out, the story wasn't true. It's another pattern from the Washington Post, carrying the water for Hamas. They continue and constantly do this. They cover for the left. They cover for Hamas. They carry the left's water. They won't tell you what happened at Berkeley. You got to hear it from talk radio shows. You got to find it online. The national media won't tell you that if it happened at Hillsdale, if it happened at Liberty, you're damn right they would. They'd be covering it nonstop. They'd be having on, what's his name from the Anti-Defamation League. They'd be having on the people from the Southern Poverty Law Center to tell you how awful it is. But because the calls are coming from inside the house on the left, they won't cover it. They're running propagandistic stories about Hamas. They're running propagandistic stories about the evils of Israel that are made-up stories, exaggerations and fables. The media, like the experts who get it all wrong, lack any humility, which is why they're being destroyed. There's no more trust left for them. They're all going bankrupt and losing their jobs. And as much as I hate to see people lose jobs, can't really get worked up about a bunch of progressives losing jobs for repeatedly lying and exercising no humility. Speaking of Hillsdale, I'm broadcasting from Hillsdale College's Kirby Center today. Thank you to them for letting me use their studio. It's a fantastic setup here at the Kirby Center in Washington, D.C. You can start a relationship with Hillsdale College today. You can take a course from Victor Davis Hanson, the famed historian. He is brilliant. And he's got a course on citizenship available for you from Hillsdale College. All you do is go to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com today and sign up for this course from Hillsdale College. You get the lectures from Victor Davis Hanson. You can take it at your own pace. You don't have to just sit there every day. You can take it at your own pace and develop this relationship with Victor Davis Hanson and his lectures. Develop this relationship with Hillsdale College, the foremost leaders in conservative conviction in America. It's like a monastery for the mind of American constitutionalism at Hillsdale College. They've got this fantastic facility in Washington. They've got their beautiful campus in Michigan. And they've got the World Wide Web to share with you around the country to evangelize the greatness of America and constitutional conservatism, classical education. And you can get started with Victor Davis Hanson at no charge. You go to ericforhillsdale.com today. Sign up. Put in your email address. Develop your relationship with Hillsdale College. Improve your mind. Understand citizenship from Victor Davis Hanson, why it's important, why it's declining, how we can revitalize it in this country. Hillsdale College, the website, Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. Go sign up today. We'll be right back. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. So let me back up here just to reset. By the way, the phone number 877-973-7425. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm at the Kirby Center of Hillsdale College. My son's with me. He gets to see me do my show in studio today. He's waving. He says hi. Bored out of his mind as Dad does his show. Trying to keep it entertaining for him. So we're doing school tours tomorrow and Wednesday. So tomorrow we do the Iwo Jima Memorial, Arlington National Cemetery, Ford's Theater, Smithsonian Museum of American History, and then a walking tour of the Lincoln Memorial, the Korean, Vietnam, World War II memorials, so long as we don't get mugged. And then on Wednesday, we do the National Air and Space Museum and then the Capitol. I just got confirmation the kids, well, my son's going to know, but nobody else in the class is going to know, that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is going to meet the kids at noon in the Capitol and let them on his private balcony. My son knew we were going to be able to be a picture taken, but I just got the email. So nobody knows. The teachers don't know. The kids don't know. Total surprise. They get to meet the Speaker of the House, the House Representatives of the United States tomorrow, or on Wednesday. That'll be cool for them. That'll be a memorable experience. I'm excited to take them around. So when I was a kid, growing up on the far side of the world, I always wanted to go to Washington, D.C., but it was halfway around the world from where we lived. It's been all over I've still been in more countries than states. And I memorized the map. It's not hard memorizing the map of D.C. and the subway system to try to convince my parents if we came, I could be our tour guide. And we never came. It was far. It was too far. As an adult, I now understand why we didn't. So when I was graduated from high school, I finally got to go to D.C. And then when I graduated from college, my graduation present from college to myself was I saved my money and I came to D.C. for a week by myself. I didn't know anybody. But, I got to go see the Constitution, the actual Constitution, the actual Declaration of Independence, the actual real original Bill of Rights. I got to go to the Supreme Court. And at the time, you could walk around the Capitol. You didn't actually need all the permissions to get inside. And I love this city. I love the Republic. I love our capital. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous city. Now, is it a crime-infested third world hellhole? Yes, but it's ours, and I love it. I love London. I love Paris, but I love Washington, D.C. It has a special place in my heart. The museums are some of the best in the world. It's a very walkable place. It does have great public transportation if you need it. You got Arlington National Cemetery. It is the coolest place to me. I have a passion for being in the city and knowing all the things to see, knowing the little secret tour to see the bullet holes from the 1812, War of 1812 in the Capitol. There are certain stairwells where the British were firing their rifles, and you can still see the bullet holes in the wall. There's the catafalque that Abraham Lincoln's body was in. If you know the right stairway to turn around and see, you can see where the body is. It's just, y'all, I love being in the city. It's fun to me. I'm glad I don't live here. I wouldn't want to live here. Some of the best advice I ever got, my buddy Brent Bozell of the Media Research Center told me, do not ever move your family to Washington, and I never did. And I haven't been up here to visit in a long time. The last time I came up was October 2022 was the last time I came up here. I used to come up every week. I used to live up here. I had a house in Middle Georgia and would fly back and forth every week. It's just fun. Now, when we come back, we got to shift gears because there were several different amazing things that happened on TV this weekend that will blow your mind when you hear about it, all of which is a terrible indictment on the Biden administration. I'll take your phone calls as well, 877-973-7425. It's Eric Erickson nationwide.